No bother. So yeah, thank you for inviting me on today to speak to you. I'd firstly like to thank everyone at St Cuthbert's for the love and support that are shown to Steps to Hope. It's an amazing partnership, and we're very grateful for that. So yeah, so my name's Richard Roncero, or Ritchie, as everyone likes to call me. I'm just a very grateful addict today. I'll touch on briefly. My life when I was younger was really difficult. I had alcoholism in my family. It was very dysfunctional. I was, as far back as I can remember, I was fully fear, very insecure, socially anxious. I just struggled as a little boy to kind of navigate my way through childhood and school and stuff like that. It was just really difficult. I had low self-esteem. I was petrified of being home with my family, due to what was going on behind closed doors and stuff. So that's really my memory of childhood. When I turned 15, I found cocaine. And I think it's quite important when it comes to where Steps to Hope is today, because the minute I took that substance, everything evaporated. My fear, my anxiousness. I was kind of reborn in a sense. I had this confidence, speak to people, and from that moment on, at 15-year-old, that became my solution to life. I used every single day from that moment. And as my addiction grew worse and worse, I started to lose all my relationships within my family. I had children, and I lost my relationships with my children. I became homeless. I started to get myself into trouble, and it was just so hard to break. I think it's important, before I move on, to say that the last 10 years of my addiction, I was actively trying to stop using. But I just couldn't. Everything that I tried, I just couldn't find a way to stop. And that resulted in suicide attempts and going to rehabs and prison and all this type of stuff. So what I think it's important to highlight is, when we talk about addiction, or more importantly, recovery, is that I blamed the drink and drugs all my life. It wasn't. It was me. It was me, how I was maladjusted to life, how I couldn't do life. Throughout my childhood and into my teens, I picked up major defects of character: dishonesty, selfishness, manipulation, control, impatience, intolerance. I think I've got about 50 defects of character that were pointed out to me. So, in order for me to get recovery, I have to change as a person. That is vital to my recovery. I have to change. So it was when I went to rehab for the second time, I was introduced to another addict who was clean and sober. He was 13 years clean and sober. And this guy done some mentoring, let's say. We've done a lot of one-to-one work together. I started to share experience with him. And I went through this recovery process. And like I say, ultimately, that process helps me change as a person. Love, tolerance, patience, integrity, humility, compassion, faith. These things were never part of my makeup. But in order for me to not just get clean, but remain clean, I had to start practicing these things on a daily basis. Like I said, I had been taken all my life, selfish and self-centered to the absolute core, to the point where it was now time for me to practice the complete opposite. So one morning, on Christmas morning, I asked my daughter if she would be willing to come along Princess Street in Edinburgh with me on Christmas Day and hand out, we had 5 gloves and 5 hats, to see if we could see any homeless people and hand these gloves and hats out. That was the first time I truly done anything for anyone without wanting something in return. And it was the most humbling experience I've ever had in my life. I remember handing a pair of gloves to a man that was sleeping on a doorway on Princess Street, and he cried his eyes out and wished me a Merry Christmas. And it was at that moment that I realised that we had people suffering on our streets who had no idea that recovery was available. Like I said, I searched for it for 10 years before I found the answer to my life, to getting into recovery. And I wanted to stop that search for our brothers and sisters on our streets. And that is where the idea for registering a charity that will tackle addiction and homelessness. So that's just a kind of skimmed version of what it used to be like. Where we're at today, and you know, it was mentioned that we have only been registered 4 years, so we're a very new charity. But within that time, we have managed to launch 5 food services. So we're out 5 days a week. 2 nights a week we're at St Cuthbert's Church, where we hold a sit-down dinner for the homeless and or anyone suffering from addiction. We're also out 3 additional nights where we have a catering van and we drive about the city of Edinburgh. We've got our set routes at set times, and we serve hot food at the side of the street as well. What we've essentially done is created our own referral line for those seeking a new way of life. So there's 2 sides to Steps to Hope. We have the food provision, and then we have the recovery services. So to date, we rent 3 properties. We've got 2 2-bedroom properties and a 9-bedroom property where we house 13 people at one time. We have designed and developed a recovery program. In my opinion, it's the best model that I have seen. We are producing incredible results when it comes to extreme addiction, homelessness. We've actually created a pathway for these guys to get into recovery. So this recovery program is basically a daily schedule which is activity based. So we teach yoga, meditation, fitness, cooking. We teach about addiction, about recovery. We do live recovery meetings. Some of them are actually held at St Cuthbert's Church also. And we do fun activities as well. This is wraparound peer support. So the group, the 13 in the group, do these activities throughout the day at various different times and support each other whilst doing it. Myself and my colleague run the whole and facilitate the whole program. So I'm 7.5 years now clean and sober, and my colleague Phil is 22 years clean and sober. So between us, we've got about 30 years experience. And I think that lived experience is key to bringing people's barriers down, you know, and getting them to probably for the first time get honest with themselves and about their experiences. What's different about our program to anywhere else in the UK, by the way, is so we're not a rehab. We're not a rehab centre. We are a recovery program accommodation, but most rehabs have got a strict criteria when it comes to prescription use and substance, like street substance use. So for example, the rehab that I went to twice, I don't kind of want to get into the drug talk, but say an opiate replacement that would be prescribed by the GP to combat heroin would be methadone. But in most rehabs up and down the country and in the UK, the highest dose that you can be on methadone is 30 mils of methadone. So being prescribed 30 mil of methadone and being stable from street substance, that is the criteria for people to get the opportunity to go to rehab. The guys that are coming to our food services or that are trying to engage with our recovery program, they're on 100, 120, 130 mil of methadone, and they're still using street substances, which means they are a million miles away from giving an opportunity to actually engage with a service that could essentially help them achieve sobriety. So Steps to Hope have removed that problem. We do not have that criteria. Our only criteria is, are you ready? That is it. Do you know, there is no local connection to Edinburgh required. So a lot of rehabs, you've got to be from that area to get in. We've got people that have travelled from Fort William, Sunderland, Newcastle, Glasgow, Ayr. Do you know, we've got people from all over who are actually in our programme as we speak. We also remove the problem when it comes to those who are still potentially homeless, but they're in temporary accommodation or a B&Bs, hostels, or they've maybe got a council flat, but it's just temporary. If they're claiming housing benefit, that creates a problem for people to then go into some kind of residential programme, because you can't claim two at the same time. Steps to Hope have removed that problem. So we fully fund everyone that comes into our programme, which means if they have a premises, if they have a property, they can keep that property, come here, learn the tools about recovery, and then once they graduate from our programme, they return back home. So it's very unique. We've kind of identified where are the problems for people to change their life, and we've removed them completely. And I'm very proud of that. So I talked about funding there, how we fund it. You know, we are a non-profit charity. So we rely solely on donations. You know, we go after grants and stuff, various grants, but they're not always successful. You know, there's a lot of amazing organisations out there vying for the same funding. So we have to think loads of different ways to try and generate funding so that we can keep the plates spinning, keep the projects going, and to, you know, continue to expand. Just on the back end of last year, November, I had embarked on a 5-week sleep rough campaign. We've got a large social media following, and we put it to our followers to select the cities that I would sleep rough in. So in November, we done Glasgow, London, Liverpool, Dundee, and Aberdeen. And I slept on the streets of these cities for a week. Just me, no money, and a sleeping bag. I lived as a homeless would for those 5 weeks, and through that we were generating, you know, funding, but not only that, generating awareness, you know, because addiction and homelessness is such a taboo subject. You know, there's a lot of stigma surrounding these two things, and I wanted to educate people on how hard and how difficult and what people have to endure living on our streets. Do you know, many people arrive in Edinburgh who have fled their city for various different reasons, and they arrive in the city of Edinburgh for the first time in many cases, not knowing if they're going to turn left or turn right when they get off that train, not knowing what services are available. And I wanted to capture that vulnerability as I entered into cities that I knew nothing about. I didn't know anyone in that city, and I wasn't sure if there was any food services available. So, you know, in each city, I sat down on the curb with a cup in my hand and I begged all day long to try and get enough so that I could eat a sandwich that night. And I documented how it felt. And if you follow the story of the sleep rough that I just went through, you can actually see me declining within the videos. You know, depression definitely started kicking in. There was a few dangerous nights where I encountered people who were intoxicated, who were, you know, being a bit abusive towards me. And this is what our brothers and sisters endure daily on our streets. So I kind of wanted to try and capture that and try and teach the public, you know, that we can't afford to put 50 pence in every single beggar's cup that we see. But what we can do is give them, you know, 30 seconds of our time, or smile, a bit love, a bit compassion. You know, love saved my life. Love was the key to allow me to open the doors and change. And so I really believe in compassion and love and selflessness. And these are the principles that I try and teach today and work daily in my life. So, you know, displaying that on a 5-week video really did capture the public's imagination. You know, we ended up with £94,000 through that Sleep Rough campaign, which was absolutely mind-blowing. That was more than I set up for 10,000. That was my goal. We ended up with 94,000. That money, the funds, have now allowed Steps to Hope to purchase our very first 2-bedroom property. So I mentioned earlier, I'll finish up on this. I mentioned earlier that we rented 3 properties. We're now due the keys to our 4th property, which will be our first purchase property, and that will now allow 2 more people to, it will increase capacity from 13 to 15 and allow 2 more people to engage with the recovery program. So listen, I'm not going to waffle on anymore. I want to thank you for listening. I definitely want to thank you for all the love and support that you give to Steps to Hope. You know, you have been incredible. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions or take any feedback. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ritchie, thank you for that very passionate summary of your original way into Steps to Hope, and also, of course, bring us up to date of your ongoing work. So all incredibly impressive. The floor is open for people to ask questions. Just while you're thinking of a question or two, I'll kick off with one just to give people time. I know very recently you received a very prestigious award for, if I got the title right, the best charity for homeless support in Scotland. Do you want to say a little bit more about that? Because that's quite an award, because there's a lot of people involved in the homeless business. Although what I got from your chat, which I didn't know, you are working in what I'm calling the extreme areas where people don't qualify to get on what we might call more local government, National Health Service schemes, which is, you know, credit to you. So can you say a little bit about the award that you got, please?
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned at the start, this for me isn't about awards. It definitely is. The best reward that I ever get is seeing a guy standing with a wee 30-day sobriety keyring because they've managed to get what we're offering here. But that award is, I mean, it's amazing for Steps to Hope to get that recognition. I think what differs, because I look up to other charities, there's other homeless organisations that I think, wow, I mean, the work that they do is incredible, and they've been around a long time, they're established, and, you know, they do amazing work. What I think sets Steps to Hope apart from everyone else is our sleeves are rolled up, like they never come down. And when we see a problem, we fix it immediately. Do you know, there's not this big red tape, so to speak, around us. Do you know, like we see, I mean, I'm running about streets at 5:30 in the morning with coffees, going into cemeteries, going into the back of Rose Street, going into Princess Street Gardens, engaging with the rough sleepers, giving them coffees, and then getting them into our soup kitchens, and then building a relationship from there, which then gets them into the recovery program. So, you know, from what I can see, we're very hands-on. If someone presents at our soup kitchen, it's held at St Cuthbert's, if someone turns up on a Sunday night and tells us they're going to be sleeping on the streets, we will not allow that to happen. Do you know, we'll contact the council, we'll contact other organisations, and sadly, most of the time, the doors are closed. Do you know, they say there is no place for them to go. So Steps to Hope will then put them in our vehicles and drive them to hotels, to B&Bs, and we will fund it ourselves and take them off the streets, literally. So I think because of for me, this goes beyond passion. Do you know, the whole team, it's just beyond passion. So we will not stop. And I think that's maybe starting to get recognised throughout Scotland, certainly. And yeah, I wouldn't have it any other way.
Well said, Ritchie. Well, I'm hoping that's given people a chance to ask a question or two. Usual thing, just give me a wave and speak. Kerry, please go ahead. But if you could come off mute first, please, Kerry.
Sorry.
Sorry, this is
Go
so
ahead.
sneaky. Sorry. How are you doing, Ritchie? Well done. Thanks so much for your talk. It's really, really good. My question for you basically is, how do you sort of like deal with people who sort of really frustrate you in their recovery? Like they may have a little period of they sort of recover a little bit, then they relapse, then they recover a little bit, and they relapse, and you kind of feel that they're not really engaging with you properly, or you know, they are a little bit, but then they go away, then they come back. And I imagine that, you know, people like that are really frustrating. You know, especially like you say, you get a real kick out of the people who have really benefited from your services. How would you deal with people like that?
Well, first of all, I identify with people like that because I was a serial relapser myself.
Right.
So understanding addiction is, you know, recovery is not a destination, it is a journey. And I feel like pain is the greatest teacher. It sounds really harsh, but pain for me was my greatest teacher. And I was thinking I was getting recovery, and then I started to add Ritchie's own twist and idea onto things and ended up relapsing. And each relapse became so painful that when I came back, it made me throw myself even more at what was being suggested. Do you know, I do my best every day to self-forget and remove Ritchie from every situation, and I try and operate under God's will. So I come from a God's will perspective, then I kind of know that the results aren't up to me anymore. I just have to carry a message of recovery and leave it. All I can do is put tools at people's feet, and within their time, they'll pick it up when the time is right.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
And thank you for your question, Kerry. Other questions, please. Just give me a wave if you would. Yes, Jeanette, please. Go ahead, Jeanette.
Hi, Ritchie. Nice to see you. Mine isn't really a question. Mine is more about your leadership, which is so impressive, because your leadership isn't about ticking the boxes. Your leadership is about remembering what's at the center of what you're doing. It's also not just about your guests that come on a Sunday evening. It's also about your helpers, about the valuing that you do and the caring, and how this is spread through the helpers and onto the guests, and the acceptance and the encouragement you give to show how you care for one another. And I also include your helpers as well, as we're all in it together. It's like somebody once said to me, there's a ruler, and there's most of the time you would like to be in the center of the ruler, but sometimes we have dips and things like that. And I think that's quite important to remember with helpers and our guests. I think also the continuity of care, aftercare, is so important that you give to people when they come out of rehabilitation. I just even think of one of our guests who, she was really a grumpy old woman, and I'm not talking about myself. Don't use a word, Ritchie. A grumpy woman. She was grumpy and bad-mooded and all the rest of it. And you thought to yourself, how do we get through this? But you know, the interesting thing, through the care and love that's been shown to her, through the helpers, she is now such a lovely person. And you know, it's impressive, because I think so many organizations get to the stage where they tick the boxes, and then they're more concerned about the organization, whereas your group, it's about the people. That's the most important thing. So thank you. It's lovely being part of your group.
Thank you, Jeanette. Can I just turn Jeanette's comment into a general question there, because on the subject of volunteers, I mean, to get 70 volunteers for any organization is incredibly impressive. Do you manage to retain your volunteers, or do they sort of drift away having done a few months' work, so to speak? how do you get on with retaining volunteers, Ritchie? Because I know you're very dependent because of the sheer scale of your enterprise.
Yeah, so we've actually, to date, we've got 105 volunteers. And, you know, some of them come and they're there for a couple of months, then they'll leave. So they're not included within the 105 that we have just now. But many of them have been here for years. You know, Jeanette will know Lorna, who was one of our first volunteers when we set up in 2018. She's still with us today. Many of them have been with us for 2-3 years. Do you know, Steps to Hope, the way I describe Steps to Hope is a feeling. That is how I describe our organisation. It's like a feeling. And if it was a brand that we were trying to sell in a shop, it doesn't take much selling. It's just once you experience the love, the care, and you start to see the results, people are just, they want involved. We have a wee joke and a laugh within the team and say, there's a Steps to Hope bug around. And once you get that bug, you can't get rid of it. And that seems to be right across the board. So yeah, we're very lucky to have the team that we have, but it makes sense to me why people would want to give their time for free to this, because we truly are making a difference.
Well said,
And could I
Ritchie.
just, sorry, could I just add to you, Ritchie, how much everybody just enjoys being there? You
Yeah.
know, they enjoy the Sundays, the Mondays, the work they do. And that's important too, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm not sure, Sally, were you waving a hand there? Because if you come off mute, you're very welcome to make a comment and a question. Sally, by the way, just a reminder, is our city centre chaplain, and I think has a rather important service on Saturday afternoon, which you can mention at the end, Sally. But go ahead with your question, please.
Thank you, and thank you, Ritchie. I suppose I'd really like to ask you a little bit about the spiritual side of your work. I suppose personally for me, a big part of my coming to faith and joining the church was I did a 12-step program with my priest, you know, and so it's so, you know, it's so connected, recovery and my spirituality is so connected. And I always feel that the spirituality of recovery has so much to offer everyone else. You know, I feel like the church could be learning so much from folk in recovery, and I've never known how we could link that up really, and also how we could build those connections, because it seems a shame that they're often two separate communities. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
I definitely think it would be beneficial. You know, I too work a 12-step spiritual program. God is active in my life, and I choose to call it God today. But you know, growing up, God just wasn't part of my life, and I wasn't really interested. But you know, as you know, when you're desperate enough to, when I was beaten a state of reasonableness, let's say, and I became reasonable through my pain and misery, I was willing to open my mind up to that concept. And that is really the only thing that I changed within my life, was opening up to the concept of a higher power, a power greater than myself, God. And since that's happened, my life changed, you know. So I would definitely be keen or interested in having a conversation with you know, the Church of Scotland or churches, and seeing how that could be, you know, delivered in, because it's vital to recovery. It truly is. And that is our teachings here. Our whole model is based on the spiritual 12-step principles.
Sorry.
Margaret, you're going to ask a question, but let just Sally respond to that and then speak. Sally, did you just want to reply to the Ritchie's comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much, because like I say, you know, recovery is the principles of it. There's so many, and I suppose I see as a chaplain, there's so many struggles that people have in their lives that those steps on that kind of spirituality would help them. And yeah, so it would be brilliant to find ways of connecting up more. So thank you very much. Thank you.
It sounds like, Ritchie, you and Sally need to have a catch up one-to-one chat sooner rather than later. We're going to go to Margaret next and then to Maggie afterwards. So Margaret, ask your question and then to Maggie, please.
Okay. Hello, Ritchie. I'm really very impressed with what you've just told us. You talk about we do, and I'm wondering if do you have professional support helping you, or are you all just people who've gone through the experience yourselves?
Yeah, when I say we, I'm talking about the group with lived experience. You know, GPs, professionals, counsellors, psychiatrists, therapists, they're all amazing. They're amazing, and there is a need for, some people do require that additional support. All I know is I tried every single one of them, and it was the therapeutic value of one addict working with another that managed to save my life. So for me, the Hope's all about lived experience, people who have been there and they now live a completely different way. That is what brought my barriers down. So yeah, it's all about, and do you know, I'll just, before we go on, part of my before Steps to Hope, we started to do presentations to medical practitioners, to professionals, and we went in and shared a bit of our experience of how it used to be when we used substance and how it is now, how we are a group of recovering addicts who go to mutual aid groups and share our experiences. And part of my service position within this group was I became a chaperone. So we were saying to GP surgeries, if anyone presents at your GP surgery who's battling alcoholism or addiction and wants to try something different, give us a phone. So I had GPs picking the phone up to me saying, I have a guy here who's interested, he wants to get clean and sober, can I pass him on to you? And I was saying, no problem, to this professional GP man. And I was taking his patient, taking them to the mutual aid group, getting them embarked on a 12-step program, and they're now clean and sober. So my point is, for me, it's all about lived experience, people who are armed with the facts and deliver that to the still suffering.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ritchie, and thank you, Margaret, for that question. Over to Maggie for her question, and then we'll go to Peter Sutton, who's been able to join us. You first, Maggie.
Thanks very much, Ritchie, for everything you've said. You've almost answered my question, because I was a practice nurse and worked in general practice for 21 years. And I remember sometimes you felt so helpless because you had somebody sitting in front of you desperate. And if you could have taken them yourself somewhere, you would, but you couldn't. Yeah. And I remember one of the best talks we ever had, we had these education talks every few weeks, you know, and we all would go, was AA talking about the 12-step program. And I remember us all saying that is how it should be. And those affected were supported by those who knew what it was like. And we always wished that there had been something like this for addicts as well. Yeah. And now I've been retired 7 years now, and I am just so heartened by the fact that at long last, you know, folk are realizing, yes, get people like yourself on board, and you can accompany that person alongside, because that's what they need. They need somebody alongside them, not just somebody in front of them, somebody alongside them. So thank you very much. Thank you. I just wish you'd been around a few years ago. I can think of a couple of folk I knew who, you know, you would have been great for. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ritchie, if I can sort of pick up on a comment there of what Maggie was speaking about, I don't think you can claim in any way you're unqualified. You haven't done a traditional medical course, but of course you've done life experiencing course in the hardest way. And for those who joined slightly later, to spend 10 years trying to get clean and free of addiction was a tougher course as one could possibly experience. So one thing's for certain, you're more than qualified, but as Jeanette mentioned a few months ago, leadership is crucial. And again, you've got that ability to encourage and inspire people. So thank you again for that. Let's hand over to Peter Sutton. Peter, you might want to make a general comment or ask Ritchie a question. Over to you, Peter.
Yep, I'll just stop my mic. Oh, that's better. Right. Great to join in at the end of this, because just hearing what's being said is just so invigorating for me. To hear Ritchie sharing with other members of the congregation is really good. And Ritchie, I mean, you talk about maybe not professional experience, but I know in my ministry, I probably learned more from you and your volunteers. And I learned, here I am at New College at the moment where I did some of my training, because as you say, it's on the ground that it happens here. It's not talking about it in a classroom, and it's not theorizing it. It's actually just getting stuck in and for the good and for making a difference. And I know that the difference you make is spectacular. And here I am, I've just had a reunion at New College with people I trained with. And one of my colleagues, she's now a minister up in Dundee, she said, you know, Peter, what's happening with Steps to Hope's incredible. My cousin is one of the volunteers. All right, so it would be not right for me to name that person. But she said what my cousin has got out of it is just absolutely staggering. And you're just changing lives, which is even just so special. You're just a tiny wee part of that. And I think I'd just like to thank you. You've brought new life to St. Cuthbert's as well. And that's been wonderful to see. So on behalf of everyone, thank you so much. And see you on Sunday evening, back in the building, ready to go.
Thank you, Peter.
And on behalf of everybody on the call who've asked questions, again, many thanks to you, Ritchie. We all certainly admire you. I think we try, however imperfectly, support you from time to time. And we see Steps to Hope at St. Cuthbert's very much as part of the core family there. And I've spoken to some of your people through the week, because as you know, they tend to congregate around St. Cuthbert's on the benches and so on through the week, and just chatting to them quietly, they see St. Cuthbert's Steps to Hope as where they belong. And I suspect the biggest thing you do for people is help them to feel they belong, they're loved, they're respected as human beings. And they are doing remarkably well trying to recover and so on. And I don't think any of us on this call with our life experiences would ever pretend these things are easy. But at the heart of it, your faith is putting love into action and helping homeless. So on behalf of all of us, thank you very much indeed. If we were all meeting face to face, we would give you a round of applause at this stage. But what we do is we offer you our love and prayers, and hopefully that will suffice until we meet again very soon. So Ritchie, final word from you, but thank you on behalf of all the team here today and the people we represent.
Yeah. Listen, guys, thank you so much. I mean, I'm just so grateful that St. Cuthbert's allowed me to come and have that meeting with them. Jeanette was there that day, and what a special relationship we have. We're on the same page. It's a family, and no wonder people look forward to coming to see us, and long may it continue. So thank you so much for all your support.
Thank you, Ritchie. And just two notices to finish with. Sally has a special service on Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock at St. Andrews, St. George's West, when we celebrate 50 years of workplace chaplaincy. And I encourage people to come to that if you can. It's heartening to think that Sally and Ritchie will get together to see whether they could talk a little bit more about how to help people in their post-recovery phase, which is fantastic. And our next OASIS meeting is the last Thursday of June, which happens to be the 30th of June, so easy to remember. And then we're talking about hybrid working, where we have the Royal London representative telling us about hybrid working, where people, or many people, like to work from home and come into the office and so on. And that's another field of the business world. But Ritchie, one point, I have in different churches I've worked in, spoken or worked with a number of homeless people, partly through Bethany Christian Trust, which is one of the organizations that I've helped and support over the years. And one of the things I've found is what you said, if just in passing in your talk, we may not always have 50 pence to put in the pot of the next beggar we come across. But Ritchie said, if we can give them 30 seconds of our time or a smile, that can often be something of great encouragement to people. So it starts off with something as simple as that. So Ritchie, God bless you. Thank you for all you're doing and your team of 105. And may you continue to inspire and encourage many others in the months and years to come. God bless you, and God bless everybody on the call. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to Anna for joining us, and Mike and Isabel in particular, and everybody else in the team. We'll finish the meeting at that stage because in theory, this is your lunch break. Bye-bye for now.